Welcome back to another transmission from V and M. I'm M.
And I'm V.
We don't do topics. Except we do topics. Because actually, if you break down what we're talking about, you can break it down into topics. So there you go. We don't do structured topics, although we have to start somewhere. So where would you like to start, V? Do you have anything in mind?
What have I been thinking about this week? I've been thinking about quite a lot about how other people might perceive your way of life. And what I mean by this is if your view differs from the mainstream of the society around you for whatever reason. In our case, I think that we live our life, have a lifestyle that in some respects does differ from the immediate culture around us, in certain areas at least. One of the main ones might be kind of our living situation, and I think I crossed a hurdle last week regarding a friend of R, who is our daughter. R1, who came for a play date with one of her parents and her younger sibling. And this is something that I've always been quite hesitant to do due to the fact that we live in quite an affluent area, and Em and I ourselves don't live in a property that would be the norm, I guess, for this area. We live in a...
Shithole.
Yeah. Well, it's nice enough for us. And so for the last couple of days since this said play date, I've been sort of mulling over what my issues are with this and why I would feel negativity towards having people round and what would cause me to feel that way. And I'm very torn because the place itself that we live in, I feel like I am at home in. It's not great. There's things I would change. I feel that it is plenty big enough for us, apart from the fact there is no garden, which I would really like. But the person who was coming round with their children lives in a very big house. And although they're a nice person, I was always hesitant before because of the fact they owned more than we do. If the truth be known, I've been beating myself up about this for the last few days because I thought, well, ultimately it's just pride that's making me feel this negativity. That's what it is. But really, the children themselves, they don't mind. They don't take all this into account, not really. What do you think? Have you got any thoughts on this, Em?
Yeah, I've been thinking for a long time that it's okay to let people see where you live, but I can understand like the fear of doing that, especially when you don't live in a place that you think is, well, I suppose, socially good enough, but also from your own self-esteem point of view, even if you take that out of the equation, you might not necessarily like the way it is as well. But having said all that, I'm kind of, the way I dress actually basically is another example. You know, I don't care. And if people accept me, they accept me. And if they don't, they don't. I'm not going to sort of pretty myself up, generally speaking, because I personally don't care about.
You see, this is one of the main things that I do respect about M, is that he is very self-assured about who he is. And
that's not so much what it is, actually.
Do you not think?
No. It's just that I don't care. It's that I don't really care about appearances. I don't really ever think I have done. It's not so much that I sort of know who I am necessarily. It's just that it doesn't factor big on my give a shit list. It never really has. I mean, that's not to say I don't appreciate sort of beautiful things. I do. I just don't worry about. I just don't try and be one of them. Nothing about me really is pretty. I think I am good looking, but it's just like I don't really emphasise it in any way. So from my point of view, it's like the psychology is that's what it is. If you don't like it, well, I don't really need you as a friend then,
Yeah, that is very true. That is very true. And I think the older I've got, the less I care generally, but it doesn't help living in a relatively affluent area, I don't think. It's a middle class problem, really. Like, it should not really matter at all. And somehow it does, in a small way. So for me, it's been about talking myself round on this issue somewhat. Because I don't want to feel that kind of pressure, because it is very unnecessary. But somehow you do, and however much I try, I can't seem to shake that completely. And it is kind of, just something I have to work on. I'm not there yet, should we say. I did feel quite proud of myself for actually letting someone in, though, as it were. It makes me wonder about the kind of whole facade that we give, other people. It goes far deeper than just where you live, basically. It's like, so I think one of my main goals is not actually to have a massive house, although that's how I've felt on the surface. I think underneath it all, my main goal would be to be more authentically me to people and not be ashamed of that. Because material stuff, if I'm honest, just doesn't mean that much to me. And in some respects, the only reason why I would place such emphasis on it is because of what other people would think. It's not necessarily what I think, because I couldn't really care less to that extent. Yes, I like things to be tidy and work properly, and I suppose I have got a kind of preference as far as aesthetic goes, but I don't place that much emphasis on it as a person. So it is strange, it's a bit of a conundrum. Like it would be for other people, it would be for show. It would be for saying, hey, look what I've got. Don't you think I'm a better person because of it? And it is nonsense, really. So I've gone between feeling bad to feeling proud of myself to very mixed about it, really. So that is what's been on my mind for the last few days, really. Since our last transmission, anyway. Largely.
I think, from my point of view, you can invite someone into your house and give them a cup of tea and have a chat, and that's all you really need to be able to do.
Yeah.
That's about, as long as they don't, catch something on the way in and out. That's about it, yeah.
We don't live in that bad a place, by the way. And I have to say, the play date itself went especially well, and the children didn't want to go home at the end.
They wanted to sleep over.
Yeah, because I know the place is a bit of a, it's not that great. So maybe I don't place as much emphasis on keeping things nice and being that protective about the things. And as a consequence of that, the children tend to be able to have a bit more freedom than maybe they would do in another environment.
Really?
Yes, I think so. I got that impression.
Okay.
And so that went down well with the little people, should I say.
Well, that's that topic. I don't know really what to call that topic.
Anyway, that's just something I wanted to get out there. Okay. Because, that's been on my mind, so...
It's out.
Any thoughts are welcome.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, I've been saying this for a while, that I felt that, we should allow R1's friends to come round. Because she's getting to that age, she's at that age where, it's important to have these little friendships and to do these little things that they do. And it can't always be just go out somewhere else. So there's that. I mean, and the sort of the fact that I'm not, when I look around, is I don't feel ashamed at all. I don't feel proud, but I don't feel ashamed. I guess there's certain things I'm proud of, I suppose. Like, we're quite minimalist, so I quite like that.
Yeah.
Quite proud of that.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, that was brought up by the parent of these children.
Yeah.
That they found it quite refreshing. And then they seemed to be mulling within their own head about all the stuff that they own. And I think it gave a thinking point to that other person a bit.
What did she say?
Just that she needed to sort out her own home. And she was surprised at how little we had.
Yeah.
But still were comfortable.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think are vitally important in a slightly smaller environment is being organised with your stuff.
And having less stuff.
Yeah, and I think she was quite surprised by that as well. So it wasn't all bad at all.
Right.
The particular person that I invited round happens to be quite an opinionated soul and is willing to give it quite freely as well. So I dare say if there was something that they didn't really like, then they would have said, if you get my drift.
Right.
So I possibly could have picked a better person. But they did invite themselves, technically. So.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, if I've crossed that hurdle, maybe there's room to go forward with it.
Well, I'd like to go forward with it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like perhaps we're too isolated.
Yeah. And I don't want to inflict that on my children either, particularly.
No.
So, because it's not their fault.
Yeah. Should we call it a day on that one?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I think it might be your turn now I've had my...
Can we do sex magic?
Do we need to? Have you told anyone about this?
No. Why would I have told anyone? Oh, I'll edit it out. It's all about...
So he's listening to them?
No, I haven't told him. I said specifically... We could do this as an issue, actually. I think we should, actually. It was on my list to do. Okay, before we do sex magic. I had a bit of an issue with the whole anonymity... Anonymity thing. In the sense that if you're anonymous and you're supposed to be fully, because at the moment we're fully anonymous, yeah. No one knows who we are. We're just voices and we disguise our names and we have, made up email address and stuff like that. I'm sure if you were a security expert, you could work out who we were, but who cares? Point is, we've got a pretty good level of anonymity, and a friend of mine, well, I have done lots of videos on the YouTube in the past, and a friend of mine noticed, I think perhaps that I hadn't done one for a while, and inquired about why I wasn't doing one, or hadn't done one, and I told him that, we'll call him R. I told R that...
Another R. It's getting confusing.
Yeah, we'll call him RW then. RW, that I've been making anonymous recordings with V, and that's why I hadn't done anything recently, because I've just been... That's where all my energy's been, in terms of production and creation. And unfortunately, I said to him that I couldn't tell him what the channel was. This is a shame, because I'm sure he'd love to listen in on all these things. It'd be right up his alley. And then he asked me why I was putting them on YouTube. If I wanted to be anonymous. Or rather, if yeah, you know what I mean. Like, the problem is, Circle of Trust. There you go, there's a title for this. Circle of Trust. Circle of openness. Circles of transparency. Circles of honesty. Yeah? So, between myself and V, I have no secrets. There is nothing V doesn't know about me. In some cases, that's not always a good idea, but that's the way it is.
We know each other very well.
And between us and you, we have no secrets because we decided to be anonymous, so therefore we could say whatever we want. Which
allows us to be. Because I think if people knew who we were, I would be less likely to want to come forward on topics such as sex magic, for a start.
Okay, but let's think about this, right? Everyone has sex. Or everyone has these secrets. Everyone has these depths that they don't share, yeah? That they don't normally talk about. And this is kind of what links back to taboo, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so anonymity links in with taboo, which we've already discussed, which links in with this idea of, is it possible to expand the circle of trust? Is it possible to have a third person knowing everything there is to know about V and M. And to actually know who we are, of course, because otherwise they wouldn't be a friend. We'd have to know them, if you know what I mean. And therefore they'd have to know us. Is that possible?
Don't know.
Well,
the thing is, because it's only us two doing the transmissions, it makes it all very one-sided then.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to know all that stuff about that other person. Their input is not involved, so you don't get their side of it.
Unless they write something on. Feedback. Bit of feedback. But yeah, you're quite right.
So it's putting ourselves out there, but...
Well, we are and we aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, this is...
I guess anyone who puts themselves on a social media platform, you know, is putting themselves out there to a certain extent. Well, they are. They just are. And some of the channels I've seen go very in-depth about a person. And they will say lots of things and...
a single person, it's easy to make that choice.
Yeah.
I see a lot of channels with just one person talking. And that's fine. But this is two people talking. And therefore, you have to make, if you're going to make that choice, you have to be pretty aware of it to begin with. And make it together. So it's not quite as easy. So we're not... So the reason we have no secrets from each other is because we're in a close relationship. You know, what that means is, like, we completely trust one another. And... Or is that the reason we don't completely trust each other is because we don't have any secrets? Just could it both ways round? And is this type of relationship applicable universally?
Outside of a couple setting, maybe?
Exactly.
Like, could you have this kind of level of honesty with
anyone?
Anyone, yeah.
Or anyone that is your friend. Because I would say, what's the point in just picking a random person and giving them this level of honesty? They won't have asked for it.
But that's what we're doing.
Yeah, but no, they're
listening.
They're listening. They're choosing to listen.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is, like...
But we're still putting it out there, so...
I'm not talking about through the internet. I'm talking about directly, yeah? So what I'm saying is, like, you're not going to just find some random person and start telling every single detail of your life. There's no point, because they haven't asked for it. But if we're talking about friendships, then... Yeah, is that possible? Now, I'd like to think, yes, it is possible, but I'm very wary, very, very wary of it, because it's not my decision, it's our decision. Because if it was just me, I could individually choose who I wanted to share this kind of stuff with, and obviously I chose V. And, you know, at some point I might choose RW if it was just me as an individual, if I wanted to share that kind of stuff. But it's not. It's us together, and so I'd like to think, you know, in a nice, perfect, not in a perfect world, but in a world where we had relationships that were really strong, that were perfect, you know. That's not the right word. I don't mean perfect.
I know what you mean. I know what you're saying.
I'm an idealist.
Yeah,
That's
me
what
too. I'm saying, I think what Em is trying to say is that he would like to see more people be more consciously aware about the relationships they have and place the most emphasis on that above all else. And that if that were the case and we all had a higher level of honesty with each other, ideally the world would be a better place because of it.
Yeah.
And by having this sort of conversation, I guess what we're actually essentially trying to do is break down a few of the barriers that are in place at this time by the human race generally, really, and try and get closer to a point where it is a more ideal way. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am saying that. That's my sort of utopian vision, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I share that, actually. I think I largely share that one.
And so the actual practicalities of realising such a vision are still actually beyond me at this point, and maybe we should discuss it further.
Well, I think that's possibly part of the reason why on a subconscious level we decided to do a thing such as this, maybe. Or it certainly was for me, I think, somewhere in there. Exploring the human condition and human relationships and
Yeah, but I just didn't think it would hit me so abruptly as it did this week.
This week?
Yeah. Because it was like, oh, what have you been doing? I haven't seen any videos, because I'm usually producing, like, at least, I don't know, enough for people to notice if I stopped, obviously.
Yeah.
And, he watches, he's probably responsible for most of the views of my videos. So, yeah, he's obviously noticed, but now he's in a situation where he's sort of being prevented from listening to any more unless I make more on my own, which I have done just because I made a couple just with me on my own, which I can put on my own individual channel, which are fine because they're not disclosing anything between us. And I felt fine. I said to him as well, okay, I can talk to you about the topics that we're talking about. I just can't give you the channel identity.
You have to find it yourself.
There's no way he's going to find it. Unless I give him a list of the exact topic names, which I didn't do. I just sort of was talking about some of the things with him that we talked about, like consciousness, what is consciousness, and culture, and expressing yourself to further the group consciousness, that type of idea.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be able to find our actual channel. Although if he did find it, he'd know it was us. Just purely by our voices and the artwork. So, who knows? Maybe he's already found it. Maybe he's already listening to this, thinking, oh, stupid idiots. But, yeah. I don't know if I can finish this particular train of thought, because I'm not ready to.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
Alright.
It's definitely something we can come back to, I think.
Yeah. Now, I'm still going to assume we're anonymous. I have to, because the whole point of me making, or us making this, is when I set the whole idea up in my head, was that it had to be anonymous, because...
Then we could talk more freely without fear of stigma,
which actually has led to this particular train of thought as well. So, on to sex magic. Yeah?
I guess so.
Yeah. Alright.
Coyly.
Well, this is the thing. We don't actually need to be coy, because we're anonymous. We can be open about it. That's what I want. And that's what I'm going to protect. If I feel like I can't be open, I may never come out to RW about where this channel is.
Or anyone else.
Well,
RW has quite an influence on M's life.
Yeah.
And has done for a good many years, and I respect that completely. They are very old friends, should I say.
But if it's a choice between my ability to speak freely or my ability, or RW knowing what this channel is, then I'll choose my ability to speak freely.
Okay.
Which sounds a bit harsh, but
it does, yeah.
It's fine, because we can still talk about these things that we're talking about here. I just can't give them the identity of the channel. It's not as if, I guess you could say it's like an artist producing art and then is not showing their best friend for some reason.
Or it's like an artist producing art, but no one knows who that artist is, i.e. someone like Banksy.
Yeah, but I reckon Banksy's friends know who he is.
Yeah, I think in certain circles it's known. And there are a lot of theories. A few really good ones, actually. So, yeah. But anyway, tangent.
So, yeah, sex magic. So what did we do? Let's run through it.
Well, basically, this is something that I've wanted to sort of look into further for a long time. It's fascinated me. Yeah, the whole idea of raising energy for magical gain, magical ritual, by way of sex, basically. And in a lot of kind of magic occult circles, sex is considered a very powerful tool to use, or the sexual energy.
Well, how long have you been thinking about that? Because
I've known about it for years, actually. I've known about the concept for years.
But how long have you been wanting to try it?
I wouldn't say it's an ongoing thing, but recently I've given it more thought, and M is up for trying different things regarding sex. So I brought the subject up recently. Basically, that's kind of how it worked. Yeah, so I think it comes from a desire to be more spiritual in sex, but also a fascination with magic kind of merges the two together quite nicely. And it is considered a very powerful energy to raise.
I did suggest to V
So,
that... go on.
yeah, that's it. That's what I wanted to say. Sorry.
I did suggest to V that we should do magic together.
Yeah.
I just didn't quite think that she would have that in mind.
Well, it wasn't in mind when he said that, but then it came to mind quite quickly that actually, yeah.
I should inform any listeners that our background, well, we like spiritual stuff and magical stuff. I think we both practiced some magic, not a lot. We're not magicians.
Yeah, very mild. I'm not hardcore, and I never have been that hardcore into anything.
I'm hardcore.
It's more theory than it is actual practice with me, I have to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, apart from when I was very young, and I definitely did dabble.
Yeah.
But, yeah, in recent years, it's definitely been a theoretical thing.
For me, in recent years, well, I am hardcore meditation, which has brought me into magic. But over the years...
See, I started off with the magic and then found meditation, so it was the other way round.
But, yeah, I have been using it sort of lightly in different ways, just to sort of experiment with it rather than... So it's not been so much theoretical with me. I have built up a theory, but I've sort of built that up by just experimenting. And I really have, over the last 6 months, stopped experimenting and sort of let it rest for a bit.
Yeah, me too. I went for a little patch maybe last summer where I was like, okay, what is this all about? So I tried a few little things, little tiny kind of mind experiments, what you might call slightly magical in nature.
Yeah, we don't need to go too much into
it
that.
wasn't, you know.
The point is, our background is sort of that we both have individually done some magic.
Yeah, and have interest in it.
Yeah. But obviously this is now magic done together, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I suggested that we did it together because one of the things with our lives is that we're both kind of drifters.
Definitely.
And we don't... And what I think magic does is it helps you focus on objectives and reach those objectives. And so I suggested doing magic together because there was kind of things that we want to do with our lives that we're kind of not quite doing, or we...
Would take more drive than we'd otherwise be willing to put forward on anything, basically. That is the sum total of V&M.
V&M. Well said, Jim. She put it into... What was it? Good words then.
Was it?
That would take more drive than the sum total of what we're willing to give, yeah. That's hit the nail on the head, I think. And so you can imagine why two people like that who are very spiritual in their approach to life would probably want to use magic to achieve that. So I suggested to V that we did magic together, which then became... Well, we were talking about sex and stuff. I was giving V a head massage and talking about sex and stuff. And then this came up. And then we read a bit about sex magic, which essentially boils down to you're supposed to sort of do your magic at the point of orgasm.
Yeah.
So it's not just two-person sex
I mean,
magic.
I'd like to make it clear that I'm not into anything that might be considered dark. I'm clearly...
Yeah, this is
I'm
not
just
warped.
simply into the idea of raising energy to the point of orgasm and using it.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's it. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. It's how you use it.
Yeah.
And...
A mindset.
And how you achieve this orgasm could be warped, but in our case, it's not. So yeah. So what we were talking about was what to focus on as our objective.
Yeah, yeah.
And we decided, or V decided, I think, or suggested that we should focus on spiritual connection as our objective.
Well, I'd like to give a little part of our history here. So when Em and I met, I always considered, or I felt very early on, that the connection we had was definitely more of a spiritual one than certainly I'd ever felt before. It was much more mature, and it was a long distance relationship, so a lot of our relationship consisted of talking on the phone and having a real rapport, and just basically it just always felt more spiritual to me. And the humdrum of life sort of takes over, you know, your relationship somewhat, I find, and it's all too easy in everyday life to kind of start to forget that connection and take each other for granted a bit. So the idea of bringing that spiritual connection to the fore again in your conscious, you know, awareness, is something that's very important to me. And I think is obviously good for anyone's relationship, which is why that makes sense to me, especially to try and bring that to the fore in the case of sex, which is something we do together anyway. It kind of just psychologically seemed to work for me, that idea, which is why I chose that.
Yeah, and I should say that I would say in terms of our relationship, we went through sort of a bad patch, and we come out of it recently, and we're into a good stage now, and we're coming together again more. And this has happened, you know, so we're not just depending on sex magic here as a rescue.
No.
A lot of other factors have come in to improve our relationship recently. And a lot of it's to do with the psychology, my psychology, of how I think about relationships. And maybe I sort of think that I could have done it better to begin with. I'd really known what I was doing, but, you know, you sort of just have to work things out as you go along, unfortunately, and that might lead you down into some negative aspects of life.
Of course, I think that's true with everyone, you know.
But at the end of the day, the most important thing to me is having a happy family and protecting that happiness. So, you know, that's the factor in my mind that sort of has prevented us from going further apart. And so we're now, and started me on the path of thinking, well, how can we become closer again? So it's not as if we're just using sex magic as to fix a problem here. It's already sort of being fixed.
Yeah.
This is just maybe part of that journey.
I feel like it really could have the potential to heighten any work we do on that.
Yeah.
Strengthen it, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's my thinking, anyway.
I think, we can definitely be stronger, yeah. It's not as if it's a wasted objective in the sense that we've already reached it. We haven't.
No.
Yeah, and I think like yours going to dip out away from that connectedness again, you know, because as you say, life takes over.
Yeah, and that's the ebb and flow of how we are. That's how life is, you know.
So the idea,
and we definitely have had a relationship that's been a bit like that. There have been times when, you know, it hasn't been so good, and other times when it's been great, and that is an ebb and flow of life, and I accept that as a reality.
Yeah.
It is, and it's true with everyone and everything in life.
Yeah. But as they say in Hermeticism...
Yeah, that is a very Hermetic kind of point of view, and that really resonates with me.
In Hermeticism, the wise man knows how to stay at one end of the spectrum of the ebb and flow. I.e. avoiding going into the negative.
Well, not avoiding it.
Yes,
exactly.
Avoiding it. I remember that distinctly from
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to read up on it again because, you know, it's been a few months.
That was one of the 7 Hermetic principles.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, I made this point because I have a magical theory, and one of the things that I do with my magical theories, as well as deciding on an objective, which is kind of what I think most magicians do, I also look at what might prevent you from reaching that objective. And that's what we call like a negative factor, is a push factor that's going to stop you from flowing naturally towards your objective. And by looking at these push factors, you know, you could call it shadow work.
That's what I would call it.
But anyway,
that is a V term. Sorry.
Looking at these negative push factors that push you away from your objective. You can like work out, okay, well, I need to counteract that as well as having this objective. I also need to counteract this negative factor that's coming into play. And so I pointed out to V that, one of the negative factors that's going to come into play here is that we might do this sex magic, but it might be gone by, a couple of days. How do we renew it? Do you know what I mean? The ebb and flow of life will take over and the potency will be lost over time, and so the magic won't actually continue. It's like a bit like hypnosis, it might work for a week, but then you might need a renewal session or whatever. To actually solidify it and counteract the ebb and flow of life, we needed something to do that, which I think is why we came up.
Well, M came up with this idea and I happen to agree, so...
So I created a word, mylar, which for us, we felt like actually symbolised.
And we chose a word as opposed to a quote or something, a paragraph, because it was simple and to the point. So as the idea is immediately that we hear it, we think about the connection again.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
It's a trigger.
A trigger.
Yeah. So we can use this trigger whenever we like.
I would like to point out that M has been using it when he knows he's done something wrong.
Yeah.
On a funny note, on a domestic note, which isn't quite what I had in mind, but...
But when you think about it, it does make sense. It's like a reminder that, okay, I know I fucked up. Yeah.
We are only talking about little tiny domestic issues here.
Connected,
yeah.
And I have also been using it...
But it just made me chuckle.
I haven't just been using it like that, though, have I?
No.
I've been using it like that, but also been using it when there is no negative.
Yeah.
When we've got a kind of close connection, and renewing that connection. So that word should then become associated with a deep connection between us. Oh, by the way, I should mention,
which I think
anyone
very
who doesn't
clever.
know anything about the actual general principle of magic, is that in general the principle is you take your objective and you symbolise it somehow. And you put energy into the symbol.
Yes, I guess so. Yeah, I think actually you might be onto something there. I think obviously that is very, very, very oversimplified, but yeah.
Yeah. Don't think symbol like drawing. Think symbol as in absolutely anything, but not the thing that the objective is, if that makes sense. Symbol can be anything. A symbol of something can be anything as long as it's not the thing. It's a symbol of the thing.
Okay.
And if it's psychologically, the important thing about symbols is that whatever they are, is that they have to be psychologically connected in your mind to the thing. It could be anything. It could be something stupid that doesn't even make sense. But as long as it's there. So we picked this sound that we felt we could use, because initially it was just a sound, not a word, but it's become a word now.
Yeah. Strangely rather quickly.
Yeah, well, this is I mean, I could do another video on this. But we picked this and we did you do the visualization? I didn't ask. We also picked a visualization. So V was going to visualize two interconnected sort of energies, ghosts, yin and yang.
I actually said kind of misty shadows or something like that were intertwined. Yeah, I think I did actually, yeah.
And I also picked a mind
very
symbol
briefly
of two interconnected rings overlapping one another.
But obviously, visualising anything at the point of orgasm probably takes quite a lot of practice.
Well, it wasn't easy, but I managed it, and the word was a lot easier.
Yeah.
And also, we've been using that word to renew it. Rather, I don't think we've been using the symbols that before. So it looks
I thought about it, but kind of on my own as a reminder. So it's more like, for me, the image is a personal reminder.
Thing, yeah. So it's,
whereas the word is a kind of connection.
Yeah, well, that's word
reminder.
That's what words are supposed to be, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. So it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So obviously, I have thought of the image since.
I have as well. I just wondered whether you thought of it at the time, because I wasn't quite sure I could actually manage. I don't think it was particularly easy to do that.
No, obviously that might take practice.
Yeah.
which is fine.
So we got our symbology down. We got our word and our images in our heads. I suppose we could have done other forms of symbology, but we chose just to do those.
Well, we are, very novice.
Yeah.
So this was enough for us. This
Yeah.
was simple, and I think actually so far so good. I'm quite pleased with,
Yeah.
our little tiny effort on
There was
such a thing.
one little tiny thing of note was that I decided that it might be good to extend the word mylar, not just to say it as mylar, because that probably takes like 1 second to say, and so it doesn't last, but to sort of counteract the longevity aspect or the life getting in the way kind of aspect, was just to extend the la, so it's my la, like that. So you extend it a bit on the end to sort of give it that symbology of extension. So it doesn't just get frittered away.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that bit. So anyway, so that was what we did, and we did it at point of orgasm. We came together. One person's got to queue up and wait for the other person, basically. That's all I'm going to say. This is useful,
that's
practical information.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm sure it is. Okay,
Yeah,
but that's that. Okay.
And yes, so we did our word at that point, and repeated it quite a lot of times, actually. It was useful in the sense that it told us when we were ready, or I was able to say when I was ready to go, and you were able to say when you were ready to go, in a sense that we were using it even before we reached orgasm. Actually, at the point of orgasm, I think I wasn't really doing anything. It was too overwhelming to actually do it deliberately at that point, but before and after, just before and after, yeah. And so far, as V said, so good. It seems to be working. But then again, as with all magic, is it only working because you're believing it's working?
Well, yes, but that's the whole point.
Or is it working? And this is the subject for another recording, I think.
Yeah,
but,
I think this is quite a long-winded one, and I'm not going into it now
I'll just
because
say-
basically nature calls.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll just say that the suspension of disbelief is important, and also it just seems to work, and it's just how your mind works, so don't even worry about exactly how it works.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what we did, and hopefully that will be of interest to anyone else, because it's got two very good words in this subject, sex and magic. So really, I don't see why we shouldn't get 1 million hits on this. Yeah, might be a good one. So is there anything else you want to say, B?
No, I think I'm suitably uncomfortable at this point, and I might come back to it, but this is something that I'll probably have to work on, so bear with me, everyone.
All right.
Who wants to listen to this. That 1 million people.
Yeah. Okay, well, I hope you have some good sex magic as a result, and I think we're going to sign off now.
Okay.
Yeah?
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.